All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Cassandra Hage, and I am the Assistant Director of the Office of Sustainability here at Washington University. And today I am conducting a Recycling Genius training. So at the conclusion of this training, you will be officially a Recycling Genius, which we're really excited to have more of you across campus. And so we are going to go ahead and get started. All right, so the problem is that Americans throw away loads and loads of material, more so than any other developed country and really any other country. That waste has many different components, but much of it is food waste. Office workers generate a lot of paper waste. And then in general, we consume a lot of single-use items. So all of that is ending up in our local landfills. And one of the solutions that we've leaned on very hard in the past has been recycling. Recycling is a great option for many materials. But one of the recent challenges that's happened in the last 5 years or so is that as China advances its environmental programs, they had historically been the main recipient of most of the recycling produced by the United States and Europe. And they were having issues with those recycling, sorted recycled materials being low value or highly contaminated because they're mostly coming from these mixed recycle streams. In which things like paper get soiled, and things like glass can be a contaminant, broken glass. So there's a lot of challenges in their end of the recycling system. And the important thing to remember here is that recycling is really a system. It depends on all of the components of the system working, which includes having strong demand for those sort of materials. And if the demand's not there, or if the materials are contaminated, that really impacts the economics of recycling. So China gave the world a heads up. We're not going to be essentially a dumping ground for the world's garbage anymore. And they basically closed their borders to all but the most high quality sorted recyclable materials. And then we saw other countries follow suit. So there's a lot of the news that folks might have heard that recycling isn't working, all your recycling is being thrown away. And while there was definitely a ripple effect across the market, I definitely want folks to go away from this presentation understanding that recycling can work very well, and the markets, particularly in the Midwest, have been developed more regionally, so we're not as susceptible to the changes in international markets. Now, another big reason why we should care about waste management in general, reducing waste and recycling, is because it's directly tied to climate change. And if you've paid attention to the news at all in the last couple of weeks, months, well, first of all, you might have seen that the IPCC came out with a new report that really wanted, nothing really new, but really putting weight behind a dire call to action from the scientific community globally. And it's really important to connect the dots. So every time we reduce waste, there's a reduction in carbon emissions. When we recycle, there's a reduction in carbon emissions. And composting actually has a significant impact on carbon reductions because compost and organic materials in the landfill creates methane as it decomposes, and methane is actually about 80 times more intense of a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So really important to have those functional compost systems as well. So we need your help, and that is why we are here to pursue this training. We know that peer-to-peer education is the most high impact way to affect individual behavior change. So we are passing this along to you and hope that you will do so as well. So the solutions that we're looking at are really solutions that have been around for the last probably several decades at least. I know I learned it when I was in school. So reduce, reuse, and recycle. And while we will be focusing mostly on recycling today, it's really, really important that we emphasize that reducing waste and reusing items before even considering recycling is really key and more high impact than just recycling a bunch of materials that could have been avoided in the first place. Another important thing to remember about recycling is that it impacts our local environment. So this slide here shows the various landfills in the St. Louis region. You'll notice that they're concentrated in North St. Louis County and North St. Louis City, and then just across the river in East St. Louis. And if you follow any issues with environmental justice, these are environmental justice issues, as the people who are living around the landfills and incinerators in the area tend to be people of color. And all of this waste, of course, has to go somewhere. It is very inexpensive to dispose of waste in the Midwest area, and that often makes some of these shifts to more responsible waste diversion less compelling, I guess, from an economic perspective compared to the coast, for example. So we'd have to work a little bit harder to make that case. But of course, it's going to be more beneficial for the environment every time that you can use materials that have already been mined or extracted from the environment. That is going to have a positive impact and preserve those natural resources. And it also creates jobs. So when you throw materials into the landfill, that's 1 or 2 jobs of a landfill operator. When you recycle, that supports a whole economic system of people all along the reuse and recycling continuum. The other interesting thing about recycling is it's really this gateway behavior to more comprehensive sustainability shifts. So when I tell people what I do, that I work in sustainability, they're really excited to tell me about how engaged they are with recycling, or that it's something that they do at home, or that their kids help them learn how to recycle, and that's all super great. I would argue that it's the first step, but it's very visual, and it can be pretty easy to understand as you have to kind of manage your household waste on a regular basis. But if you look on this study was looking at the kind of comparative environmental impact or carbon emission impact from different types of behaviors, and recycling is somewhat lower on the kind of the spectrum. So I was really interested to see that washing your clothes in cold water is actually slightly higher impact than recycling. But vegetarian diet or a plant-forward diet can be almost twice as impactful or so than something like recycling. But we hope that by getting engaged with more responsible behavior like recycling, that that folks will start to expand their horizon as well. And we do see that that's a pretty common trend. So shifting gears, we want to talk a little bit about WashU's waste system and how we approach waste here. So we have across campus, we have 2-stream recycling. So we have recycle bins and landfill, and usually those are paired together. So you have kind of a choice of where your items go. This was launched in 2010, and the important thing to note here is this was a really intentional, high impact, high effort campaign to offer recycling campus-wide and to have it be simple and easy. It was also done at a time where the recycling market was exploding, and so we were really hearing like, send us all your recyclables and we will take it. And there wasn't as much of an emphasis on sorting well. And we believe that we'll need a similar type of shift in order to ratchet up our waste diversion efforts in the future. Just to give you a quick overview of, just to give you an idea of like how the types of waste that is produced at WashU, we have about 16 million pounds of waste that are produced annually. Around 40–45% are diverted. And we do know that there is recyclable and divertible material in this landfill mix, but this is what we actually get to, what we've documented as diverting. A huge portion is mixed recyclables, and about half of this percentage is actually shredded confidential paper. So that's a huge portion of our recyclable materials on campus. And then we also have some pre and post consumer compost. We recycle electronics. All of the landscape trimmings are composted. And then we have some other smaller streams as well that we track. Then on some places in campus, particularly in many of the dining areas, we do collect compost. And I mentioned before why this is important. All of that food waste has really high nutrient content, and in order to return that nutrient back to the soil and back to the earth and not just put it in a hole in the ground, it's really essential to do practices like composting. So we have several locations that have pre-consumer or back of house composting, and they're collecting all the kitchen waste. So that's true at Shell Cafe in Farmstead on the med school campus. And this might be behind the scenes. You might have no idea that this is happening, but this is where all the, again, really nutrient rich, good, heavy weight materials are produced and collected. And then we have a handful of locations that are also accepting post-consumer items. Let's see, not as prevalent on the School of Med campus, but right before the pandemic, Ethnic was doing this for the events that they were hosting. And we are exploring some limited pilots at the School of Medicine as well. And Heather can answer more questions about that if you have them at the end. People often want to know, where does our waste go? And that's a really good question. So with single stream waste, we have a hauler, Waste Connections, that transports the waste to a recycling facility. They do not own a recycling facility in the area, so they contract with a company called Federal that does sorting, or they might use other materials recycling facilities in the area. Beyond that, so most of the St. Louis region has their residential recycling going to Republic Services, which has a state-of-the-art recycling facility here in town, and they do a really good job with sorting recyclables. And I always do encourage people that to visit their municipality's website to learn about what specific things they are taking for recycling, because it might differ slightly from place to place. And then with our compost, there's one game in town. So St. Louis Composting is the only compost facility that's certified, permitted to take post-consumer food waste. And they have a subsidiary, Total Organics Recycling, that transports the materials to get it there. Also helpful to know that there are tons of stakeholders in our waste management system. And so when there are changes or successes or failures in the system, it's working with all of these stakeholders to address those issues. And then a little bit on progress. So we have a strategic plan that ended in 2020, and we did a study to see, what we do track this information every year. So compost is a really exciting thing that we saw significant increases in, and we see a nice trend. Of course, this was disrupted by COVID, but we are starting to see those programs return as we reopen. Also, we had in 2016 in particular, when there was that crash in the market and China had just said no to recyclables. We were seeing a lot of rejected loads from our recycling hauler, and that caused us to do some interventions. But it was kind of a moment in time, and we've seen a significant trend. And actually at the School of Medicine, we haven't had any issues with rejected loads. So I just want to make sure that folks are getting that information. But the more education that we can do so that we know we're recycling right and sorting right, then the higher quality materials we're sending to our partners. As far as progress goes, again, 2020 and COVID did definitely throw a wrench into the work, all the momentum that had been built over time. But we have made some progress, and it's going to take another big shift of investment to take the next steps in zero waste and approaching zero waste. For the School of Med, saw some great improvements here, and but we actually regressed a little bit with 2020. The very interesting thing about 2020 at the School of Med was that if we look at the specific types of material streams, we actually saw a pretty significant increase in single stream recycling, about 25% average month to month between the prior year and the COVID month. And landfill was also decreased by 25%. So we saw increase in recycling, decrease in landfill, which was very different than what happened on the Danforth campus. And it was very interesting. I'm not really sure what happened, but we're excited to see those trends and hope that they continue. However, the overall diversion rate dropped, as I mentioned, and that was because we saw a significant decrease in the confidential paper shredding by about 1 million pounds, which is about a third of the overall recyclable materials. So the overall impact still skewed towards a reduced percentage of diversion. But it also potentially means that there are more digitization of files and significantly more paper saved. So that's a good thing to relay. That makes these diversion percentages a little bit more complicated, but happy to answer more questions about that if folks have them. All right, so finally to the good stuff, how to sort your materials at your office or on campus. So we have signage on all the bins across campus. The important things to remember here are that we're trying to keep out food, liquids, any materials that have been significantly food soiled, have like significant residues or half full of salad dressing or something like that. And then paper cups and to-go bowls often have a plastic liner on the inside that prevents that paper from basically turning back into paper. And so they don't like that as well. Coffee cups and coffee lids are another one that we see a lot and are not recyclable, even though they are paper. And then the number 6 plastic, which is what the coffee lid is also not recyclable. But other than that, the line hasn't changed too much. So they're still looking at for metals, aluminum, and steel, as well as glass. And that's glass bottles. For plastics, it's pretty much any type of plastic that food would come in with that exception of the number 6. And so you just look at the bottom to see that number. Paper, so pretty much anything that tears. And then cartons is another one. So you'll see there's this soy milk container, which is called a TerraPak, and it's actually a little bit of an anomaly. So usually you want a single type of material for recycling. So you want it to be just paper, for example. But this is a great example of innovation in the recycling industry and materials packaging industry, where they designed this great package that reduced the need to refrigerate items and significantly increase the shelf life, which saves food and also saves energy from refrigeration. But it's this multi-material pack. So there's metal, like a foil liner, paper, and plastic. But they designed a way to collect the items and then to also recycle them and develop the market for it. So it is this kind of full circle material and a very responsible approach to designing packaging. And that's one that confuses people a lot. So I spent a little more time on that. So pretty much any beverage container or carton can be recycled. So now I'm going to spend a little time thinking about talking about kind of the whys, so that you can do some of this figuring on your own if you understand the concepts of how the recycling happens and how the materials behave. So when items go to the recycling facility, they go through a process that has some people involved at certain points in the process, and then a lot of mechanization. So things like there's a cardboard screen and a glass crusher, and there's a paper screen and sorting station, and they're able to use a lot of different engineering tricks and the way materials behave to do this different type of sorting. There's something called an eddy current that's able to get aluminum out of the mix because it's not magnetic, but they do use magnets for other items, for other steel items. And then they have these fancy optical sorters that operate at very high speed, and they're able to detect the type of plastic, and they blow a bit of air and knock it out of the line to sort it in the right direction. So very cool stuff. So for plastics in particular, this is one that people do get confused about quite often. So these chasing arrows are really just telling you the type of plastic polymer that is in the material, and not necessarily that whether or not something is recyclable in your local system. So again, in our system, number 6 plastic, which is polystyrene, and you might recognize as foam plastic, styrofoam. It's just in a different, for example, solo cups, it doesn't have the air blown in the same way that styrofoam does, but it's the same pretty toxic and low grade plastic that the recyclers don't want. Other systems might not take anything besides 1 and 2. So again, it's just really good to check in with your local municipality. But for the most part, regionally, they are accepting anything besides the 6. The other thing to note is that because something is compostable doesn't mean that it's also recyclable. So there are bioplastics out there. They might have this number 7 on it. It's only going to be compostable if it says PLA. This number 7 category is considered other. So the bioplastics fall into this other category, particularly because they're somewhat newer to the mix. But if you have a compostable cup, don't put it in recycling. If composting isn't available, you do have to landfill that, unfortunately. And then the other thing I like to mention is a lot of brands have started putting this how to recycle guide on their packaging, which can be really helpful in helping you understand if it's something that needs to go back to the grocery store in the case of the soft plastics, or if it can be recycled in single stream. So that's something that's great to look for. And this kind of dissects that the instructions of maybe you have something that, like I saw something like this on a Q-tip box where you had specific instructions for how to manage the box, the plastic cover, and then the tray. So definitely encourage folks to look at those because they really can be very useful. Another important thing to take away from this are the 4 T's of recycling, or common things to avoid. So what we're hearing from the recycling centers is that these are items that cause a lot of problems for their processes, and at all costs, these are what we should keep out of the waste stream. So tiny items can be contamination because they're not caught by the screens, and most of those are contaminants for glass, which are kind of the last thing that is left after everything else is taken out from the recycle stream. Tanglers, so this is probably the biggest thing that folks hate. So plastic bags, plastic film, even though they might have those arrows on them, you can take those back to the grocery store for special recycling, but you can't put them in the single stream. They wrap around the machinery, like you can see in the image here, and they actually have to like shut everything down and cut it off, which causes downtime and is pretty unsafe for the workers as well. Leave those things out. Tech, so things like batteries that people have wanted to recycle and put into recycling have caused fires in recycling centers. When they're going through these processes, they can ignite, and if you have loads and loads and bales of paper stacked up, that can be a really recipe for disaster, as you might expect. E-waste items like technology can be recycled through a different process. So you're going to want to make sure to check with your municipality, or if you're at WashU, there's a specific way through EH&S to recycle and dispose of e-waste. And then we also have e-waste collection events twice a year for personal e-waste items. So be on the lookout for that as well. And then textiles are another one that get wrapped up in the machine as well and can be recycled through other avenues, like the drop boxes that are in a lot of school, grocery store, and gas station parking lots. Those are great places to take your clothing for recycling rather than putting in the single stream recycling. And then also there's wish cycling. So wish cycling is this concept where you want to do the right thing, you want to not throw something in the landfill, but just because you want something to be recyclable doesn't mean it is, and it can actually kind of wreak havoc in the system. So those are items that you can maybe try to avoid purchasing if possible, or avoid purchasing things that are packaged in those ways. But other than that, it's landfill is there for a reason, and some things are just best suited for landfill, unfortunately. All right, and I didn't mention this earlier, but if folks do have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat and I'll answer them at the end. But I'm not managing the chat, or Heather, you can also hop on if there's questions that you'd like to interject with, or other information you'd like to interject. Oh, go ahead.
I would like to, since you were just talking about the textile recycling, I would like to plug, we're going to be doing a scrubs donation. I'm sure that you guys are aware that a lot of people are switching to standardized red and gray and black, I believe, scrubs. And we know that there are a bunch of scrubs that people won't be able to wear anymore, and we are going to be collecting them and donating them to a textile recycler. And I can talk a little bit more about that if anyone has any questions, but we're going to be putting out bins on Tuesday, and that will be live on Tuesday. So reach out if you have any more questions.
Great point. Thank you. Okay, so switching gears to compost. Again, this might not be something that you encounter as much on the School of Mike campus, but if and when we bring big events back, composting has been a big part of the employee picnic. And this might also be information that you take home and start a compost bin. So for compost, the main things that they're looking for, we are taking all of our items to an industrial compost facility, which can take things like anything that came from the earth. So they can even take shells and bones and meats and oils, and all of those things are fine to go into composting for this industrial system, not so much in home composting. So if you are doing home composting, you're going to want to look up what types of items should be avoided. And then brown uncoated paper products can also go in here. The main thing we're trying to avoid is things that have been bleached or have a coating that won't break down in a compost. But brown items work well. And for things like pizza boxes that are heavily soiled with oil, composting can be a good option for that. And then there is compostable serviceware as well. So you'll want to look on it for indicators that it's compostable. For plastics, that'll be that number 7 PLA or polylactic acid material. And if you're purchasing these items for an event or something like that, it's probably best to actually visit the Green Event resources on our website to get the specifications for certified compostable paper and plastic products. With compost as well, just like with recycling, we want to make sure that the materials going in are high quality. And if there's items that that don't truly break down in the compost system or have chemicals that would impact the system, or I'm sorry, the end product, the compost, that obviously isn't going to make a good product. And St. Louis Composting does bag and sell, or just also sells in bulk, a whole variety of wood chips and compost products. They've engineered a lot of the soils on WashU's campus, including specialty soils for the East End transformation, for the green roof, and also rain garden mix. And we also source our landscape mulch from them. So it's a really nice closed loop system, which just reinforces the fact that we want to make sure there's good stuff going in, so there's good stuff coming out. And with in the Midwest, where we have an abundance of land, this windrow system works really well. They're able to build up the piles and get it hot enough through the anaerobic digestion. Sometimes get them confused. But basically that's where there's this healthy mix of nitrogen and carbon. It doesn't get stinky when it has the right ratio. And there's a lot of biotic activity in there to break down these materials. So it's going to kill pathogens, kill weed seeds, kill other things that that we wouldn't want to have in the finished product. Yeah, and they're open for tours too, if it's something you'd be interested in seeing. It's very cool. All right, so again, with landfill, when we have just a 2-stream system available, which is in most places across campus, especially the School of Medicine, you're going to want to throw your food waste and any paper to go boxes into the landfill. And for 3-stream, which is when you have compost available, those items are going to go into compost instead. And then here's just another graphic of that concept of, again, it's not asking people to default, well, compost is best, but if compost isn't available, put it in the recycling. Definitely not what we want to do. There are a couple of products that could go in either, like say cardboard, for example. But for the most part, if you have something that's really food soiled or like a certified compostable plastic, if compost isn't available, it has to go to the landfill. And then things like coffee cups and plastic utensils, again, are ones that we often see in the recycling and need to have folks redirect that to landfill.
Cassie, we have a question in the chat. Can you please clarify the 7? What is and isn't recyclable if we have 7? Is the PLA okay or not okay?
Yeah, great question. So in general, number 7 is a catch-all. It includes really low grade or mixed grade plastics. So like little army soldiers or little toys that you would get in like a McDonald's Happy Meal or something like that. Those are often a number 7 plastic, not really recyclable, but it's one way that they use, again, like low grades of plastic. So you're not going to see that often in food serviceware. You might see it in some packaging, but specifically for compostable plastics, which also fall into this catch-all, they will have the chasing arrows. It will say 7, and then it'll say something like PLA. So again, even though it has those chasing arrows, doesn't mean that it's recyclable. It just is telling you what type of plastic it is. And in this case, it would be a plant-based bioplastic, which is not recyclable. Okay, so now it's time for a quiz. One that I know came up in advance is paper towels. Kleenex, so it's paper product. Is it recyclable, compostable, or does it go in the landfill? And if anyone would feel comfortable hopping off mute or responding in the chat, what you think it should be.
Could you say the first part of the question one more time?
Sure. Paper towels, recyclable, compostable, or landfill?
I'm going to guess compostable.
I think landfill.
Okay. So you both are right, but with some caveats. So paper towels, particularly if they're brown and they don't have chemicals on them, are fine to go in compost. If compost isn't available, which is often the case, it is going to go in landfill. This one often confuses people because it is paper. It is a paper product. It does tear, and so something there's like anything that tears can be recycled. Of course, there are always going to be exceptions to that. So Kleenex, tissue paper, toilet paper, and paper towels are all a low-grade paper. When you recycle paper, it goes from long fiber to shorter to shorter to shorter. And so every time you recycle paper, it's actually getting downgraded rather than going 100% into new paper, which is why for most things you need some degree of virgin or new wood for paper in general. So these products are less desirable for recycling because they've already been through that process several times and they have very short fibers, but it is often something that is made out of recycled content, and you can certainly source items that are made out of high percentages of recycled content, and that would be ideal. So don't put paper towels in the recycling. What about this cup that's in the middle, this clear plastic cup?
Numbers on it.
I think they're usually a 6, aren't they?
I think so, which means it wouldn't be recyclable and go in the landfill.
Landfill, yeah. Unless it's a different number, if it's a 5 or.
I've definitely seen a 5 before, but
Right, me too.
I like the discussion. I like to kind of hear what you guys are thinking through. So these plastic cups are typically a number 1. So they're going to be a little bit like kind of bendy, and they will have the number 1 on the bottom. I think these are pretty common on our campus. You might see it at Starbucks. And I haven't been to either of the cafes recently, so I can't speak to this, but so typically it's the number 1, which would be recyclable. There is a more rigid version or also one that's kind of milky looking, and that's the number 6. So you would just want to double check on the bottom, and you would know. How about this coffee cup on the left top corner?
Landfill.
Yeah, that's what I think, landfill.
I would think the lid could be recyclable if it has the appropriate number, but I don't know what numbers they are on there.
Perfect discussion. So we do know this one is a number 6. There might be some out there that are number 5, so it's always good to check. But typically, if it does have that cardboard sleeve, you could recycle the cardboard sleeve, but otherwise it would be landfill. And of course, this is something that could be done away with entirely if you're able to bring your own coffee cup or coffee mug. So we encourage people to think about that. particularly in an office setting, if you're able to have mugs available for use or bring your own, that can be a really good alternative. Excuse me, how about this to-go box in the bottom left corner?
It looks like one that you had in the compostable slide.
Right, if available, if not landfill, I would think. If it's not, if you can't go to compost because it's got food in it.
Yep, absolutely, you got it. How about this this soy milk container here?
That was on the recyclable slide and I was surprised by that. So I'm going to say recyclable.
Yep, indeed.
I would think all of that coating on there would prevent it from being recyclable.
Yeah, and you're spot on with that one. And this is, again, that one that was really designed, the system was designed to make sure it could be recycled. And it's recycled not in every area, particularly some of the like more underserved rural areas wouldn't have something like this, but we do, which is great.
I have a question about that. Is that for Silk brand specifically, or like any food with that type of packaging?
It's really, so cartons are something that we talk about as a general category, so beverage containers and cartons. And again, these systems are really designed for these single-use items like the cartons. This includes the ones that are like Tetra Pak, or I forget the other word for it, but things like you might see soups come in this, or broths, and also gable top ones like the little cartons that kids get at school for milk. Those can be recycled as well. They're slightly different than this, but it's a similar system. And then how about the utensils here in the bottom right?
Landfill.
Yep, those are gonna be landfill. Again, I would encourage bringing your own if you're in an office setting or if you're doing an event. Sourcing compostable utensils is possible and recommended. Great job.
I'll do a little plug here for 10 MCC. We have, I'm not on campus very often now because I work mostly remotely, but we did a utensils drive. I think it was in 2019, maybe early 2020. So there should be utensils there that you're all welcome to use when you're on the floor and can wash, and we have set up like a drying station and all that. So if you see that those are depleted, please let me know and we can, maybe do another drive because it's been a while since I've looked at it. But we did that a while back to try and reduce the amount of plastic utensils people use.
Awesome.
Yeah, I love that case study. That's one that we highlighted in our newsletter, and I think it's such a great idea. Appreciate that.
Cassie, we have another question in the chat. For a glass jar with a metal lid, should the lid be placed on the jar for recycling or separated?
That's a great question. So again, this would probably differ from municipality to municipality, but generally speaking, the recommendation in our area is actually to put lids back on. So if there's any like drops of liquid in there, that's going to keep it contained and hopefully not impact the paper around it. And then really it's likely that the glass is going to be essentially broken and the metal will be sucked up by a magnet. So with glass, it can really go either way. With plastic bottles, it's definitely better to have the lid on top because the lid will actually get lost through the screens if it's not attached to a bottle. All right, I'm gonna keep going, and then if you have any questions come up, we can certainly answer those at the end. So again, want to circle back to recycling, super important, but remember to reduce and reuse first. I also like to throw in a bunch of other R words like repurpose, rethink, redesign, re-engineer, because we really just need to go back to the drawing board about how we interact with the materials around us, particularly when it comes to packaging. So just a couple of initiatives that are and information that are available across campus. So bottled water is a big one on the Danforth campus. We've had a ban on selling bottled water, but I understand that there's still some bottled water at the med school campus. This boxed water is available. We do use it for the big events, like commencement, for example, as an alternative to plastic. For the reasons I mentioned, this is still a recyclable product. It doesn't have plastic in it, and there's actually less embodied carbon in it because of how it's transported through the life cycle of the product. But it is still an avoidable single-use package. So when you're not trying to get water to 5,000 people on a hot day outside, but have alternatives, definitely encourage folks to consider those alternatives first. But if you need help sourcing these for some of those circumstances, let me know, we can help you out. I love this picture. This was taken at the employee picnic when we did a challenge for people to bring their own water bottles. It's my favorite. But some other programs that do exist, some of them might be in a little bit of flux with COVID, but there's a bottomless coffee mug program, at least on the Danforth campus. I'm not sure if there is on med school campus. There are water bottle filling stations universally across campus. Hopefully they've reopened at the med school. I know that was a temporary adjustment that they made before they viewed those were safe to use during COVID. And then using plates and silverware whenever you can. There's also reusable greenware for events. This one is also mainly for Danforth, but they're pre-COVID, when we were doing more events, there was an option for this for small scale events through Heather's office as well. And I assume that will probably come back soon as well. So some other concepts, the School of Medicine has made a huge headway with reducing the number of plastic bag liners are required for containers. And of course, anytime you can save a plastic bag, you're saving plastic, which is great. If recyclables are clean and dry, it's not really needed to have a liner in that can. And you can also request it's called a sidekick. It's like a little tiny trash can that hangs on your recycle bin. So at your desk, if you have like a tissue or something like that, you can put it into that little can rather than have a huge trash can by your desk. And I think many of the offices are set up at School of Med so that you have these clustered areas where you can actually you have to get up and take it over there, but it'd be really good to just encourage folks to walk around a little bit and to reduce the number of liners and reduce some of the labor to have these sorting systems. And then we've got tons of resources on our website for green event planning. So at any scale, whether it's just a lunch for your office or something larger. So there's lots of ways to reduce waste at these events as well. And then we can circulate the presentation at the end. And this slide just has a number of different resources linked so that you can help plug into some of these tools that do exist. And then final takeaways: clean, empty, and dry. If in doubt, leave it out. 6 NICs. No plastic bags or utensils in the recycling. Avoid the 4 T's: tiny things, tech, tanglers, and textiles. Consume less in general. Pass it along. And then keep it simple. So as recycling geniuses, you are going to want to share all of this information with everyone, but it's a little bit too much for some people who don't have all the context. So I would say take some of the high points and pass those along, make kind of micro adjustments, but otherwise it can seem overwhelming to people who aren't quite ready for it. So congratulations, you are now a recycling genius. You can spread this word to others. We have sample kits that are available if you want to do demonstrations. We now have this recording that you can pass along, and happy to do other tailored opportunities as well. All right, and with that,
I do have a quick question.
yeah.
So in my office, we have the little pouches that you can make single serve coffee with. I think Mars manufactures them. They seem really odd for a company that's trying to reduce waste. So I'm curious as to like, how many of those do we go through a year? And is that a significant enough impact to like matter?
Yeah, so you're basically talking about the Keurig pods that.
That's right. Yeah, the Keurig pods and other things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, those are a huge challenge. I do not have the numbers for how many of those are used. Those are kind of a department by department basis. So
Okay.
that as a department, you can opt in. And that's actually one of the big challenges that we have, is that we can do some of these like large system-wide shifts, but as far as dictating what departments do with their budget, we've had far less willingness on the across the purchasing chain and then communications and everything. The university just really doesn't like to tell departments how to spend their budget. So that's why we work with offices through the Green Office program to try to encourage alternatives. But you're absolutely right. Those are a challenge. That we have some resources on our website specifically for, if you feel like you have to have a Keurig type setup, there are some ones that are better, but there are also like loads of other options as well. And it's kind of one of those, like, can we rethink how we do coffee? Yes, there's the convenience factor and the individualization, customization factor, but are there some other ways we can kind of go back to the drawing board on that? But some companies do take back programs, and so you can have a special collection area for those items, and offices across WashU have done that, and they do have systems for kind of depackaging and separating and recycling the different components and composting the grounds. But
yeah, okay, cool, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, Thomas just put in the chat that according to their website, the pods are recyclable. And I think in that case, it's just the deconstructing and making sure which parts are recyclable.
Right, so you'd have to peel back the lid, take out the grounds, and then recycle the little plastic cup if it's not a number 6, which sometimes they are.
I would think that would fall into the tiny category of the teas. Are those big enough?
That's a good point. I guess I haven't compared a golf ball to a Keurig packet, but it'd be probably pretty borderline. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, are there any other plugs or thoughts before we wrap up?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, this is part of your guys' recertification for the Green Office program. So thank you so much for being a part of it. Your office gets points for your participation, but then the sustained impact is, of course, you putting these concepts to work and passing them along to your colleagues. Feel free to reach out at any time to myself or to Heather if you have further questions pop up, and we'll send this out if you need any additional resources to follow up.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you so much, Cassie. We will make the video available to the rest of the team who wasn't able to be here today. So thank you.